Angela, Angela, Angela. So she's been out for a little while now, and everyone has kind of had enough time to play around with her, see how she feels, pretty much. And for someone that looks as good as she does, I mean, come on, NetEase know exactly what they're doing. Their character designs is just something else. That they know what part of the community they're catering towards. But for as much effort they've put into the character design and bringing somebody that a lot of people don't actually know, like, you know, she's pretty cool in the comics. Yeah, her story does change a little bit from at least what I've read. And for somebody that I do quite like, she just doesn't feel right in Marvel Rivals. So what went wrong? What is it about her that just doesn't click with people? Like, today I'm going to give my opinion of why I think she doesn't really fit the way that she should. It feels like NetEase are kind of, well, or at least the rest of us are trying to put in a square peg into a circle hole. It just doesn't quite fit. There's something missing right now. And I'm going to try and put my finger on the pulse of what it is people are struggling with, whilst also maybe trying to think about ways that they could fix it, because she's a tricky one. We don't really want a beta testing Spider-Man, or the tank busting Wolverine, or the absolutely disgusting Black Panther that people have been complaining about for so long. Thankfully they changed him now, but we don't want someone like that as a tank, because that's going to push people away. So why did they go for a flying tank? It's, you know, it's a question quite a few people have been asking, especially coming out of the season of Flyers, where a lot of people left the game because, quite frankly, if you didn't have good aim, then you were going to get shot on by a lot of the Flyers, and it's a concern a lot of people had. So when they saw Angela could, well, fly at will pretty much the entire game, a lot of people were quite rightly scared. You know, how are we going to face a tank that can just fly away or fly straight into my backline? Well, once we actually got our hands on Angela, that concern quickly went, let's be honest with you. The content creators that managed to get their hands on Angela early quickly found out that, yes, some of the issues were present. It's any character that can fly straight into your backline is always going to be scary, especially if you're a support player by yourself. But Angela's very squishy health bar quickly made her less of a worry for the backline and more of just a nuisance that will occasionally just fly in, pop her head in, grab somebody for a split second, and then more than likely just die. Her low health bar didn't really resemble that much of a tank. It was more of like Mr. Fantastic in his big form, but maybe a bit more mobility, but still just as much of a pushover, to be honest. So with the implementation of her attack needing to be charged just by moving about, it forces the player to try to constantly move around. But obviously, as a tank, you're wanting to be in the forefront. You want to be in your opponent's faces and just being a nuisance. But Angela can't do that with that low health bar, so she has to just kind of fly around doing nothing for a little bit. So you might think, oh, okay, we can play her as a bit of an off tank coming off angles, and, you know, just being a bit of a dive character, but not in the traditional sense like a Venom or a Captain America of just balls to the wall, being in the mosh pit and just surviving. Instead, Angela has to come out from those back angles and just hope that she can get back out just as quickly, because that low health bar will, quite frankly, disappear. If you have two people in your backline just watching out for Angela, and that's honestly including the supports, you can get rid of her in the blink of an eye. You can deal with her very easily. And not to mention, she's pretty damn loud. She is, I know she's big, but my word. That did not account to have a jet engine every time she flies about. Honestly, I can probably hear her from the other side of the country right now. She's probably taken off, she's probably on her way to bitch slap me for chatting shit about her. But she's so loud, you can hear her from anywhere. So it's not like you can just come up behind somebody without them knowing. They're gonna have an indication you're there. It's not, it's not a Dead by Daylight killer. They've not got Insidious. It's not a basement bubble. We're always gonna know she's there. She's coming for you. So if you just have somebody like an invisible woman playing a support, they can be prepared. They can deal with her much easier than they probably should. And that comes down to one main thing, I think. Her charge attack when she picks people up and, like a little shish kebab, grabs you and flies away. It's a bit useless. From personal experience, you only grab someone for about a second before they just hop straight off and go back to what they were doing. You're literally not even a nuisance. You're just like that little fly that just won't leave the room. You'll come occasionally and, somebody might try and swat you out of the way, but that is literally it. You're not causing much issue. Invisible Woman can just use her force pull or push, and you're done. You will get pulled straight out of the air and just stunned for what feels like an eternity because you will lose all that momentum. And it can just stop the charge. Why? I mean, I think we all know why. Look at Wolverine. Once you are in his mitts, you are gone. If you're a Groot, what are you supposed to do? You can't exactly Fortnite your way out of that and just build some walls and just box up and be safe. There's not much you can do. So if they were to put that in a tank, then let's be honest, that mass exodus of players would skyrocket. So they took the safe option of not doing that, but it feels like they've toned it down too much the other way, and Angela's just missing in that punch factor. She can't kidnap anybody that well, because your team have to be pushed up so much that small jab out of the way of pulling somebody into your team, if that fight is just on top of each other, then maybe it'll work. The two teams are both on point, and it's a 2v2, a 2v1 maybe. In those situations, if you were just a normal tank, you're going to be much more helpful to your team. Whereas Angela, she's going to be flying around the map, just looking for deals and little. She's going to be going down those middle R's looking to see what she can buy and offer, instead of actually being on the point helping the fight, just because she needs to go and charge her attack or come off on a weird angle to actually be useful. Instead, just be a different character. Yes, it's an argument you can give for anybody that's weak, or just don't play them. It shouldn't be an issue we have, though. Everybody should not necessarily be on equal footing, but everybody should be viable in situations. But it just doesn't feel like Angela ever fits that mold. It feels like, she's just a character that's going to be on the select page. Somewhat like a Black Widow. The characters are there and maybe in the right hands could be dangerous. I mean, we've seen some of the top Black Widows. They are monsters. But they work in certain ways and can't just be crammed into any old slot. They have to be methodically played. And, it's still early on. Angela could find those miracle teams that make her work. But to a new player that just picks her up and goes, oh, look at this muscle mommy, I want to play her, they're going to be miserable. They are going to explode time and time again. And at that point, they're just going to go, screw this, I'm just going to play Emma, because, hello, if they're playing Angela, they're looking at something, and Emma's got it too. Back to the point, because I went off on a massive tangent there. If NetEase were to just buff Angela, what are they going to do? Because then they are going to get stuck in a Wolverine position. It is that same argument that we will all give to Black Widow. Yes, it might feel pretty crap headshotting somebody and it just doing 3/4 of their health at best. You know, shoot someone in the head, oh, they should be dead, oh, they're one shot. But they physically can't buff her, because if they do up that damage and she becomes a one-shot machine, that's going to feel awful. As somebody that plays a DPS that might necessarily be squishy anyway, she's already a bit of a threat, especially if playing against a Mantis. But if they buff that natural damage, if she's playing with a Mantis, some of the bigger characters are going to be scared. Like, it's going to be a very dangerous game. So they don't buff her damage. There's not much they necessarily can buff. It's a character that will be stuck in a limbo state, and probably will be for a very long time. But that same thing is going to happen with Angela. That if they do buff her, let's say they buff her normal damage, okay, that might not be as dangerous as maybe a Black Widow, but if they were to buff the time that she stays with the grab, you know, whilst you're on that little shish kebab, that could be very dangerous, because then you're walking into Wolverine territories. You're walking into, well, I could say the Black Panther or the Spider-Man territories, but those are kind of different examples for different reasons. But you are walking into that Wolverine environment of just being abducted and you can't do anything, especially when that character has more health, and when their basic attack, if charged, can just ping you even further back. Yes, it's not much, but if we're talking about buffing her, they could buff her there again and make that even worse, and make it feel so much worse to play against. It'll feel better to play with and play as, and I mean, anybody that is playing Angela is having a pretty good time visually anyway. But the core thing is playing against. If it just becomes a season of buffed Angela, every single game being that new Angela, it's going to get stale and people are going to dislike it, and we're going to see players leaving just like we did in Season 2 when everybody thought that it was getting stale there. So what are they going to do? Do they make her faster? But what would that do? Do they buff her base damage and then run the risk of people finding the best ways to play her, and then that getting into a big problem, and then they have to nerf her in other ways? I don't know. It's a real tricky one. To me, I feel like the movement to charge up that little bounce attack, that little, you know, you stab them and they go, ooh, jump backwards a little. Do we need that? Or do we at least shorten that or increase how fast it charges? Or do we use that as its own ability, so you activate it and your next attack hits somebody off, and put that on a cooldown and give them charges instead? You know, there's things I feel like they have to play around with Angela and just kind of think of different ways to approach it. In a general sense, I think NetEase have done pretty well, and they've implemented some very, very cool characters. And their whole MO of Marvel Rivals is to make you feel like the superhero, like you are actually playing that character. Everybody loves playing Spider-Man, whether you're good at him or not is another question, but it's because you feel like Spider-Man. You play as Thor, and you do kind of feel like the God of Thunder in a very weird way. Yes, you are playing a game, you are, and it doesn't feel 100% like you're Thor and you're just about to crush absolutely everybody like in the films. But you do feel that sense of belonging in the character in a very strange way. So they have done really well in that. But Angela just feels like she's missing that source because she's so weak. There's no other way to really put it to me. She just feels weak. She's underwhelming as a character. And especially if you're going to compare it to someone like Emma, who was the last tank that we got, it's a huge fall from grace. And yes, you can't constantly, every season, add a new broken character. It may be good for the thumbnails and the titles for the content creators, but for the game, it's unhealthy and it's just not going to be good. But then going from strong characters to implementing such weak ones like Angela, it doesn't feel good. It might bring people in for the first week, but once they realize that that's not anything special, that shiny new toy is actually just a bit of a trash can, they're just going to leave, because the changes to everything else, yes, are good quality of life changes, and yes, can shake things up like they did in this new season, because best believe some of those changes were crazy, and they did need to happen for the sake of the game's longevity. But people aren't going to stick around for that, and it might not bring new players in, because they don't know the intricacies of the characters yet. They don't know how things work, and they don't know how extreme or broken certain characters might be, or how unfair others might be, or how weak others are. They're gonna see these new toys and think, ooh, this is cool, and get absolutely stomped. So it's a real dangerous game they're playing, and if they follow the pattern of characters like Angela and Wolverine of being abduction characters, and a flyer at that, you know, they're really tiptoeing a dangerous line of some game-breaking abilities. But because the implementation isn't on point, one, it's not an issue, but two, it's not particularly just usable. The same argument could be made about Blade. I could have made this exact video about Blade last season. He is so fun to play as, and has such a cool playstyle mechanic, but he just doesn't feel that strong. It feels like you're just tickling someone as opposed to slicing them into pieces with that sword. So where do you go to buff those characters? You know, this is twice in a row we've gone through a very similar thing of, oh, this character is really cool aesthetically, and the material they have is amazing, and we're actually getting to see them put into practice in a character in a game, but they're not very impactful. At what point do we cross that line of these characters have very cool abilities and can very much change the game, but do we buff them to go beyond that point? Do we keep them weak so we don't have to worry about the implications of some of their kit, such as the reduced healing, or the lifesteal, or the kidnapping? Or do we buff them and let those abilities run rampant and become a bit of a problem, just for the sake of making those characters more playable and more enjoyable? It's something that you really have to think about for the sake of the game, but also the sake of the community. It's a very strange middle ground that they're going to have to find somewhere to go. They have to put their foot down at some point. They have to decide where they're going to put their camp. They can't really stay in the middle and appease everybody. That's just never going to happen. They're going to have to go more one way than the other. But will they learn from the mistakes that Blizzard made in Overwatch, where, you know, they might have gone more one way as opposed to the other, and that didn't work? Will NetEase take the opposite side, or will they go the same way? I guess we'll have to wait and find out and see what happens in the next few weeks, especially with the mid-season coming up. Or I say mid-season, but come on, new characters, they switch it up. Daredevil looks amazing. Aesthetically, the game never puts a foot wrong, but we have to see how his abilities play out, because maybe we have this exact same video in a few weeks' time. Who knows? We just have to wait and find out. But I mean, other than this, I do have so much fun playing Marvel Rivals. I know a lot of us do, and those of you that do watch this video, whether it's all the way up to here or the first 2 minutes, you obviously enjoy Marvel Rivals. You play Marvel Rivals for a reason. It's why you would have clicked on the video. But what do you think they can do to actually change the way this is going? You know, numbers are going down, but we have still started off at such a high point that those numbers are obviously going to go down. We can't exactly go to the moon and then go straight to Mars. You know, we have to come back down before we can shoot off again. But what do the Marvel Rivals team actually do to get us to that point? Or do we just falter and sit on the waves of the ocean right now and just wait for the ship to go down? I'd love to know everybody's opinions. Other than that, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, all the classic YouTube stuff. You're all very used to it by now. But I'll see you in the next video.
Why is this real? I wanna know. They're sad and want to feel emotion.